Hello, thank you so much for having us. We are delighted to be here tonight. Thank you to Elizabeth Ray for the invitation and Friends of Missouri State Archives for having us for this conversation. It makes sense to kick off tonight's discussion with inviting Senator Schupp to tell us how the book, You Can Too, came to be.
Thank you. And I too want to thank you for braving the cold and maybe a little bit of rain, and to the Missouri State Archives and to Elizabeth Ray for inviting us here tonight, and to my now good friend, Ashley Beard-Fosnow. I'm going to tell you about the book, and you all have one, and I'm going to let you know when you can follow along a little bit. But let me tell you how You Can Too began. One night in March of 2021, the director of the Department of Conservation, Sarah Parker Polley, invited all the women senators from both sides of the aisle, all 11 of us, to her home, to her husband's wonderful man cave, and invited us over for a night of relaxation and dinner. Now, of course, we had to get permission for the Senate to shut down at 6 o'clock that night so that we could go, and they finally agreed. A lot of people put pressure on them to let us do that. And that night of relaxation and camaraderie resulted in the 11 of us sitting around the table saying, you know, Missouri is 200 years old since it's been a state, and here we are, more women in Missouri Senate than ever before in our history. We should do something that is good for the state of Missouri, that people from both sides of the aisle can support, and that will have a lasting legacy for the people in the state of Missouri. We sat around the table, laughed and talked, and came up, we all agreed to the idea of let's promote literacy. We want to make sure that every child who is going into 4th grade can read and read on grade level. We all agreed to that, and we had a 3-pronged program that we put together. The first was we were going to write a book. We even came up with a title that night, You Can Too, so we could encourage young people to reach their goals and meet their dreams, just like each of the 36 women in this book had done. We also decided that we wanted to go out into the community, talk to citizens, to educators, to people who care about learning and literacy, hear from them what was going on in their communities, the things that were helping children learn to read, and the things that were holding them back. So we did that, and we also said we are going to, if it's appropriate, create policy to help kids learn to read. So that is the work we did, and this was probably got the biggest splash of all those pieces, and all of you should have one per family to take home tonight. So that is how this all came to be. Senator Jeannie Riddle and I worked together. Senator Jeannie Riddle and I termed out after last session, last year. So we are the two that are no longer there, but as you heard, this year we even increased the number from the biggest number in history. Now there are 12 women in Missouri State Senate. We hope to see that number grow. As you know, there are 34 members at any given time of Missouri State Senate. I wanted to just give you a little bit of facts about the number of people in our state Senate. So Missouri's 200 years old. Women got the right to vote 100 years later. 50 years after that, the first woman senator was elected. And in that time, since 50 years ago, 36 of us have served in the past. And every one of those people is represented in this book. If she is no longer living, we had a family member or close friend write her story. I also wanted to tell you that over that 200-year history, 1,118 men have served. So we're a little bit imbalanced, and we want to work a little harder to add some more females, some more women to our legislature. I was going to give you some highlights about some of my colleagues that you'll find in the book. And the first 11 pages of senators in the book are the 11 that served, that helped put this book together. So they are the first women in the book, and they're alphabetically organized. The last group of women, the other 25, are also organized alphabetically, just so you know that. So if you want to follow along, We're going to start with Lauren Arthur from Kansas City, who is from the 17th Senatorial District. Everybody got that page? Okay, so the thing I want to tell you about Lauren is the youngest member of the Senate ever elected at 30 years old when she was first elected. Sandy Crawford on the next page is from Buffalo in Dallas County, District 28. She is a former banker who loves reading and doing crafts. Carla Esslinger on the next page lives in Wasilla, population 177 in Ozark County, the 33rd District. She and her husband, in addition to the work she does here in Jefferson City, own and operate an auto body shop in Wasilla. Now, how they made a living with 177 population is beyond me, but I guess if everybody brought their car there, they would do okay. The next person is Elaine Gannon. She is from Jefferson County, the 3rd District. Elaine is the youngest of 11 children, and she spent her career before politics as a PE teacher, so I think it was about 32 years. Carla May is from St. Louis City and County, so her district goes from the city into the county of St. Louis, 4th District. She actually performed in New York City theater. She performed in Shakespeare and improvisational work. Angela Walton Mosley is our next senator from St. Louis County, District 13. Angela and her husband are both legislators. Her husband, Jay Mosley, serves in the Missouri House. Next, Cindy O'Laughlin from Shelbina, Shelby County, District 18. Her hobby is working with adopted Basset Hounds. Next, we have Holly Thompson Rader from Sykeston, District 27. I'm actually going to read you a little bit of what I wrote summarizing Holly's story, because I think it's so interesting to know that people from all kinds of backgrounds and challenges in life made their way to the Senate because they cared about public policy and making positive change. Holly was raised by a single mother, lived in trailer parks, and her family depended upon welfare. When Holly was 15, her family was in a bad car accident, and Holly had to quit school and take care of her mother. Shortly after, Holly got married and had a baby at age 16. She was determined to give her daughter a better life and worked hard to make a living. She depended upon and attributes so much of her success to God. She took classes when she could and completed high school and eventually got her college degree. It only took her 17 years. She did it. She opened a business and realized how important the role of elected officials is because they were making policies that impacted her and our everyday lives. I think Holly has an amazing story, and I'm proud to have served with her. She is still serving in the Senate. And Holly and I, just so you know, are from different sides of the aisle, but one of the things this project did was brought all 11 of us together. Jeannie Lester Riddle from Callaway County, District 10. Jeannie and I were the partners who termed out and who really led the development of this book and the other parts of our project. So I'm proud to have worked with Jeannie. We served all 14 years together in the legislature, but until we worked on this project, we could never have called each other friend. Now we are dear, dear friends because of this project. Next is me, District 24. I will tell you that I never imagined entering politics, even though I was 6th grade class president, 10th grade class president, student body president in my senior year, and I did also want to let you know that I played the lead in the school play. It was Pinocchio. Thought you'd like that. And then finally, Barbara Ann Washington from Kansas City, District 9. Barbara Ann writes skits and plays. And I'll turn it back over to you, Ashley, with the microphone.
No, that's excellent. Did you want to go back and read any more of Senator Riddle's story or read more of your story, or should we keep moving forward?
I think I'll let you read my story, and if we have time at the end, I'll share my story with you. How about that?
That
Sorry.
sounds excellent.
I'm not following the outline as well as I should.
Senator Schupp, as you were giving us the background on how the book came to be, you mentioned the literacy objectives of those 11 women who are currently serving in 2021. Are there any more pieces of the story, or you said that the book was the most successful of that three-pronged approach. Was there any other pieces of the literacy initiative that came to be?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. Actually, a bill was passed my last year in the Senate to help improve teacher education in the field of reading and literacy, and we are hopeful that it will have great success. It's based on research and will help teachers and people who are studying to become teachers. So we're excited about that move forward. We are hopeful it will work well, and time will tell because we will see the numbers. We know that kids who come out of third grade not being able to read on grade level, they're in that pipeline to prison. We want to stop that before it happens. We want to give children the opportunity to do what they can. I will tell you one more thing that I didn't tell you yet about the book. So on the very back page, I'm going to tell you two things. Okay, not the very back page. Close to the very, oh no, it is the very back page, the back cover. So we hope that as young people read this book, they will see themselves in it. That's why we have a mirror. And I will tell you a quick story about the mirror. The mirror cost $9,000 to add to this book. And Missouri Humanities Council actually said, we fit with their mission. They, under the leadership of Schupp and Beard-Fosnow, paid for the printing and publication of this book, $68,000+, including the mirror. And we're really delighted that they did this. We printed 10,000 of them, and they have been delivered to fourth grade students in their schools all over Missouri. So they've been given to the school libraries and to fourth grade classes. We're really proud of that and so grateful. We came up with these grandiose plans, but we needed somebody to pay for it. And when Jeannie Riddle asked the Missouri Humanities Council, they said, yes, we want to be part of this. We were going to put in the mirror because it was too expensive to add to the book. So the senators were thinking, how can we get the money? Can we each chip in a little bit? Not a little bit, a lot to do this. And Missouri Humanities Council, and again, because of Ashley, said, it's so important to the book that we're going to do that. We also wanted to make the book interesting for kids, not just to read. And you know, a whole book is one page, because one story, one person's story, is a book in and of itself. But we also wanted to give kids the opportunity to manipulate something. So on the back of the book, you see a treasure hunt. And the treasure hunt is both color-coded to match stories inside, and it takes a line out of people's stories so that kids can go back and explore the book. And it's a challenge to them to try to find which story this particular phrase or sentence matches. So we passed the policy. We did go around the state in the senators' districts and talk to people, as I said, members of the public, educators, and others, and got their input, shared our story with them, and asked for their stories, and asked how we could be helpful to them. Now, I will tell you, it was my office that planned that trip, all those trips around the state, and then I got COVID. It sounds like I have it tonight, but I don't. I just have a cold from 2 weeks ago. I got COVID and couldn't go, but I understand that these sessions in different districts were just remarkable, and that people learned a lot. And part of how that legislation came about was as a result of what people heard in those communities. And you're going to talk about the 25 senators whom I did not serve with necessarily. I did with some of them, but who were termed out or who were done serving before the 11 became senators.
Correct. So we're looking at the year 2021, there were the 11 women serving in the Missouri Senate, but at the same time, there were 25 other women who had served in the Missouri Senate previously. And so they are listed at the front cover, and it was so fun to watch everybody come in to the program tonight and start flipping through the pictures and the names and see women senators that they recognized or that they remembered stories of. The 25 include Roseanne Bentley, Mary Groves Bland, Joan Bray, Paula Carter, Aunt Norma Champion, Maria Chappelle Nadal, Maida Coleman, Jane Cunningham, Kiki Curls, Pat Danner, Rita Hurd Days, Mary Gant Newquest, Gwen Giles, Jolie Justice, Jamila Nasheed, Margaret Renault, Luann Ridgway, Betty Sims, Sarah Steelman, Irene Tripler, Gina Walsh, Yvonne Wilson, Harriet Woods, Robin Wright Jones, and Anita Yeckel. Do any of those names sound familiar? Who remembers some of these women, the former 25, as they were serving? It's so fun to read through their stories and to recall a little bit about what was happening during that period of Missouri history as these women were serving. If you'll turn with me to page 47, one of the stories that I'd like to highlight in the book is that of Anita Yeckel. It says here, with her father stationed at the Army testing facility in Provo, Utah during World War II, Anita Yeckel spent her early years in Salt Lake City. Her father died when she was 6, and Anita returned to St. Louis with her mother and younger brother. Her mother worked to support them and stressed education as the route to a better future. She went to college at the University of Missouri St. Louis and earned a degree in political science. After college, Anita worked in banking. She took time off to raise her 2 daughters and eventually resuming her career and working with her husband at the family saving and loan company. Anita witnessed firsthand the deregulation of the saving and loan industry in the late 1980s, which reinforced her interest in politics. In 1990, Anita won election to the Lindbergh School Board, serving terms as president and vice president, and then Senator Irene Tripler asked her to run for the state Senate seat she was leaving. Anita couldn't say no. She won election to the Missouri Senate in 1996 and served for 8 years. Anita loved taking care of people, helping others, solving problems, standing up for those near to her. She was a friend with a warm smile and always willing to go the extra mile. She is soft-spoken but could be feisty when needed. And most importantly, Anita was respected because she showed respect to everyone and everything. Anita left the Senate when her second term expired in 2005, and she died on August 26, 2015. It's a great story. It's very inspiring. Her story is wonderful, but I also appreciate the background of this story. So Mary Cottom was a legislative assistant working in Senator Riddle's office while we were compiling the book. And if you know Mary Cottom, you know that she is a force to be reckoned with, and she has a Rolodex that will blow your mind. And she has relationships with so many people who have served in Jefferson City, or especially senators like Anita Yeckel. Mary Cottom was also Senator Yeckel's legislative assistant. So when we were trying to track down a family member who could write this page of the book, Mary Cottom was able to facilitate that conversation because she had cultivated that relationship with Senator Yeckel's daughters. And that's a fascinating piece, kind of the background of the book coming together, is how much of every page is based on relationships and people earning trust over the years and then cultivating those relationships. I'm not very good with keeping up with the clicker here, am I? So that's Senator Yeckel's page. The other 2 women that I would like to just point out from the former 25 senators who have served is Gwen Giles and Mary Gant Newquest. And so their pages are on page 34 and 35. Okay, so Gwen Giles was a pioneer who blazed a trail for future generations. She was the first African-American woman elected to the Missouri Senate and later served as the first female assessor for the city of St. Louis. Gwen moved to St. Louis when she was a little girl, just 3 years old, and at a young age she developed a passion for protecting the civil rights of minorities, which led to her becoming a community organizer. She encouraged others to get involved in political issues and work for racial equality. Gwen was one of the founders of the West End Community Association that paved the way for peaceful integration of the West End neighborhood in St. Louis. In 1968, Gwen went to work for Congressman William Lacey Clay as his campaign manager, and when a vacancy occurred in the 4th District Senate seat in 1977, Gwen ran in the special election and won. She was reelected to a full term in 1978. In the Senate, Gwen continued her efforts to end discrimination and improve the living conditions for people of St. Louis. She resigned her Senate seat in 1981 to accept an appointment as St. Louis assessor, where she worked until her death on March 26, 1986. This page was written by William L. Clay Sr., retired U.S. Congressman, as he reflected on the Senate career of Senator Giles. And so I love that story. I think that this is inspirational and motivational for young people today, or really any of us, as we live through this age of accelerating change, where at any minute somebody might be in a position where they'll be the first or the pioneer or the trailblazer in whatever field or industry or circumstance they're in. They can reflect on stories you can too, and find courage and inspiration to take the leap and be that trailblazer. Along the same lines is the story of Mary Gant Newquist. Mary Gant did something in 1972 that no one had ever done. Mary was the first woman ever elected to the state senate in the Show Me state. Mary didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a senator. She grew up in Kansas City, where she was a good student at East High School. Her favorite subjects were debate, English, and art. After high school, she worked as a color finish artist at Hallmark Cards in Kansas City. She learned about standing up for what you believe in from her father. He was a charter member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and worked at Kansas City Power and Light. The union fought a 3-year battle to win recognition. His example of standing up for employee rights made a big impression on Mary. Mary's introduction to politics came from her sister, who worked for Jackson County Prosecutor Joe Teasdale. Eventually, Mary joined a political club called the Democratic Good Government Association. She won election to the Democratic Central Committee in Jackson County and became a community activist working on school board tax issues. She was a big supporter of the Kansas City Museum of History and Science, and with the blessing of the Good Government Association, Mary ran for state representative in 1966 and served 3 terms. In 1972, the association supported her run for state senate only after she had collected endorsements from committee members in all 5 wards of the district. She won with 70.5% of the vote and served 2 terms. When Senator Gant submitted her page to me, she sent it by email and then followed it up with a phone call so we could talk through some of the logistics. And while I had her on the phone, I pressed her for a little bit more detail, and I was asking her about some of the portions of her story, and she went on and on with the most fascinating memories and recollections as I really dug into what was that like to sit on that Senate floor and literally be the only woman in the room. And it was fascinating. She was so gracious to tell me her stories and to share, and I must have been very excited to hear them because I was working in the basement office at my home and my teenage daughter walked by. She kind of stood in the doorway to eavesdrop on this conversation. As I hung up with Senator Gant, Vera said, "Who were you talking to?" I'm like, "Well, Vera, funny you should ask. I was talking to the first woman who ever served in the Missouri Senate." And Vera's like, "Really?" And so we talked a little bit about this background, how Senator Gant was interested in English and debate, or her father was a blue-collar guy. And I could see my teenage daughter, the wheels turning, and her noticing that this leader was very approachable, had a very approachable background, with a story and a journey that was extremely impressive, but was tangible. So often we think of history makers as people, faceless characters from centuries ago who you can hardly think of or understand or relate to. Whereas here is an instance where my teenage daughter had a direct contact with a history maker who was still living and sharing and writing her story with for young people across the state of Missouri. Here in this picture was one of the best days of my life when I got to meet Senator Gant at a reception as the book was published here in Jefferson City. It's a day that I will never forget. So at Missouri Humanities, we had some pretty strategic conversations about why it was important for us to be one of the partners in producing this book. And for us, we had 3 objectives. First, it was important to capture these stories. Each woman's experience was important to preserve, and I especially love that we captured it in a format where it's written at the 4th grade reading level. Almost everybody in this state can read and understand the stories in these books. Secondly, I think it's really interesting to look at the book as a whole and look at differences in culture across regions, across the state, differences in culture across the 5 decades, and then consider political history. Right? This book is a great on-ramp for people who might not be super familiar with the Missouri Senate. As I travel the state talking about our work, almost everybody I meet can tell you who the president is. A lot of people can name their mayor, but very few people can tell me the name of their state senator. Whereas in this book, it's a great explanation to young people about ways that these women got involved in state-level government. It also shows different policies and issues that were important to these women, which can serve as an example for young people or people who aren't familiar with state government of the type of work that state senators do. So it almost creates an on-ramp for civics education. Along the line of political history is the page at the front of the book called Votes for Women. This page was written by my colleague Caitlin Yeager. She's a historian at Missouri Humanities. Her title is Director of Programs, and she took the effort to include a page about women's suffrage. It's kind of the upstream efforts that it took for women to achieve the right to vote so that then later they could run for political office. It's Women's History Month, so it makes sense that we focus on this page, and so I'll read it quickly for you. In 1787, our founding fathers spent the summer writing the nation's Constitution. When they finished, the document stated that only men had the right to vote, not women. It didn't take long for women and men to start demanding equal voting rights. Although Americans have been calling for women's suffrage, a word meaning the right to vote, since our country's founding, the women's suffrage movement really kicked off at a large event in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. Well-known suffragists such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott gathered hundreds of people to draw attention to this important cause. Over the next several decades, people talked to congressmen, gave speeches to large crowds, and held marches and protests. An official amendment to the Constitution was introduced in the 1870s, calling for the equal voting rights regardless of gender, but it would not yet pass. A very important event during women's suffrage movement happened right here in Missouri. In 1960, during a big political meeting in St. Louis, thousands of women gathered downtown in silent protest, wearing white dresses with golden sashes and holding signs that read, "Votes for Women." This historic moment became known as the Golden Lane. Missouri was also home to several notable suffragists, such as League of Women Voters founder Edna Gellhorn and Phoebe Couzens, one of the nation's first female lawyers. The amendment finally passed in June 1919 and was ratified or put into effect in August 1920, becoming the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. Victory. We're so grateful for the suffragists who made sure that women's voices would be heard for generations to come. To honor this, we celebrate Women's Equality Day on August 26th each year. And so the third objective of Missouri Humanities for participating in this book was to achieve our literary and literacy objectives as an organization. So Library of Congress designated Missouri Humanities to serve as the state affiliate for the Missouri Center for the Book. So we're always looking for great stories about Missourians or stories written by Missourians to share across the state. And certainly this book is one of those. Our mission at Missouri Humanities is to connect Missourians with the people, places, and ideas that shape society. We also have a literacy program that worked very well with the work that the senators were doing called Read from the Start. And so this is an initiative where we offer resources and information to parents and caregivers about the importance of reading aloud to children, and then we offer resources to help them do that creatively and successfully. And the idea here is that reading aloud to kids will foster a love of reading throughout childhood, which has a correlation with adults who are lifelong learners, which we hope helps instill in them the desire to think critically, and then that helps us create a more thoughtful, informed citizenry. Engaging in the humanities, arts, and history allows us to ask ethical questions essential for developing self-critical motivation and judgment. Right? So famously, it's not just the 36 women in this book, but leaders throughout American history, we've found that a love of reading helps them be better leaders. So Daniel Webster famously talked about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson's literary acumen. And he says that it made them more accomplished for action in the affairs of life, and especially for public action. Right? We see this again in our very own President Harry S. Truman, who is famously not college educated, right? But he spent his youth reading, engrossing himself in biographies and histories to prepare himself for a leadership position. So again, I love this flow chart. We foster a love of reading in children, which leads to adults who are lifelong learners, like all the folks in the room here tonight. That encourages critical thinking, which leads to a thoughtful and informed citizenry. And from that thoughtful and informed citizenry, we leaders rise out of that body. What's interesting about this book is that it almost creates this flow chart. It creates a circular flow, right? So then we have leaders, like the 36 women featured in this book, and the 11 women who came together to write the book, who are then encouraging childhood love of reading, right? And then it kicks the entire flow back to the beginning, which helps create strong Missouri communities. Senator Schupp spoke earlier about working together with some of the women that she had never had an opportunity to work on initiatives with before, prior to this book, and I think that bipartisan across the aisle effort got the attention of a number of media outlets. Additionally, Mary Common in Senator Riddle's office sent a copy of the book to every state legislature across the country, noting that Missouri, I'm so proud to be a Missourian, Missouri is the model for how non-like-minded people can come together to do good for their state and their community. Why don't,
well, I'm going to go back a little bit. So I want to talk to you, as you can imagine, this book and everything we did with regard to literacy was truly a labor of love. And these stories came in, they were sent to me first. And then I sent them on to someone who volunteered to be our editor. She is actually an editor in real life, but let me tell you how I met her. Her daughter, her name is Sherry Burrows. Her daughter, Haley Burrows, was an intern in my office. That's how we came together. Every year that I've served, I've had one or more interns in my office. It's a lot of work, but I really think it helps develop young people and give them a sense of what goes on and what they might decide to do in terms of creating policy and moving forward with things that they think are important and care about. But through Kaylee Burrows, I was able to meet with her mother, and she took on this role. And actually, originally, we all wrote our own stories, or someone wrote them for us, as we told you earlier. But we all wrote our own stories. None of us had been authors. We knew that these books were directed to fourth graders. But the truth is, not being authors, none of us knew exactly how they would be received by fourth graders, and some of the words are kind of hard. We also wrote them in the first person. Sherry read them and said, you know, I think it might be better if we changed these stories and made them about each of you instead of by each of you, which was really a wonderful way to put these stories on paper. We also were supposed to limit ourselves to 250 words. Now, if you think you can tell your journey to anything that you've done in 250 words, it is really hard. And Sherry Burroughs did an excellent job of helping us get to the essence of our stories and putting them together so that they would look like this for you. There is also one other person. When I told you earlier that my office planned the trips around the state for the senators to reach out to their communities, I had help that summer through an intern. I want you to turn to page 40. On page 40, you will see Senator Betty Sims. Betty Sims was a Republican from my district, and we were separated. I was the third senator after she finished serving to serve. Betty was a Republican, and I'm a Democrat. Betty's granddaughter reached out to me and said, I would like to intern with you over the summer. Do you have anything I could do? So I want you to know that from a Republican to a Democrat, this family has gotten involved on both sides of the aisle to make sure good work was being done. So when I say we set up these schedules, you can imagine, first of all, getting all these stories was like herding cats, and then trying to put a schedule together that worked for everyone, that worked with the venue that we had, that allowed the people in the community who needed to be there, and then all the changes that happened along the way. Well, Betty Sims' granddaughter, Morgan Weber, was great at getting that done. She's a student at Case Western, and she is one of the big reasons we were able to travel the state. So this labor of love was not only among us, the 11, it was among the 36, Missouri Humanities Council, and all of these people who helped us along the way that you might not ever hear about, who wanted to see success and who wanted to build literacy. Now, if you read this book and you think, those are hard words, the fourth grader or the young person in my life won't be able to read this, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to read this with them. At some point in time, they will be able to read it themselves. And remember, each story is a book in and of itself. Each story is a biography, actually an autobiography, if you will, about the woman in the book. So if you have 36 individual stories, plus all of the other things in this book that you'll see as you go through it, that you could share with young people in your life. And frankly, I think people my age, your age, your age, young people, also will find some of them interesting. I'm going to take a minute, if I can, and I think we have the time, for me to treat you to Jeannie Riddle's story. So I'm on page 18. I think she is page 17, not me.
Page 17?
Yeah. Okay, so if you look at page 17, Jeannie Lester Riddle, Republican. We sat across from each other on the floor. We are now, I will call us dear friends. And I'm going to read her story to you. Mommy, I can't see you. I'm right here, Jeannie, her mother responded. Mommy, I can't see you anymore, Jeannie cried as she stared directly at her mother. A child going blind and immediately slipping into a coma would be any parent's nightmare. Fortunately, a World War II Army field doctor practiced in Jeannie's small Missouri town. The doctor made a house call to see Jeannie and immediately placed her in hospital isolation. She had acute spinal meningitis, a highly infectious, rapidly spreading disease surrounding the brain and spinal cord. Doctors explained that damage from the disease could be expected within a few hours, and within 24 hours, it could cause death. Even if Jeannie survived the night, Doctors predicted severe brain damage, blindness, deafness, and an inability to speak or move her limbs. Though Jeannie learned many life lessons from her parents, the first stemmed from this illness, she says. Never accept inevitable defeat. There will be a way if you are willing to look and not give up. And miracles still happen. After 2 weeks in a coma, Jeannie awoke without any terrible outcomes. She had been given a second chance at life. Her father reminded her not to waste her God-given gift. A state senator since 2015, Jeannie treasures memories of her 28 years of teaching and coaching as she shares the lessons she's learned with others. Read, explore, get out of your comfort zone, and help others achieve success. The result will be a life well lived. And I think we have time, so I'm going to actually read you my story, edited by Sherry Burrows, as you've heard. Thinking back on her childhood, Jill Schupp remembers lessons learned and promises she made to herself. When she discovered that some people didn't have enough to eat and were going to bed hungry, she had trouble falling asleep. She promised herself that when she was older, she would find a way to feed hungry people. In Sunday school, Jill listened intently as the rabbi told stories about ancient people coming to the synagogue, not just to pray or study, but also to solve problems. The synagogue was the heart of the community. People would listen to each other, hear different sides, and work to fix problems. In 6th grade, a shy classmate approached Jill, explained that she was being bullied, and asked Jill for help. Jill talked with the bullies, and the bullying stopped. Though she was never sure why the girl had come to her, Jill learned the importance of stepping in and helping someone when she could. As the years passed, Jill discovered that people are hungry in many ways, not only for food, but also for education, opportunity, good health, fair and just treatment, acceptance, inclusion, love, and kindness. She learned that sometimes people need others to speak up on their behalf, to stay safe or fulfill a need. And she learned the importance of talking with others, listening, and working together to solve problems. Jill ran for public office because by working to make laws, she could help take care of people, she could feed the hungry, and fulfill her childhood promise. So that is my story in 250 words or less. Thank you. Thank you. I talked to you about the mirror and the treasure hunt, but let's talk about some of the earned media that came about through the publication of this book and our other prongs of our literacy effort. So Missouri Life magazine included a beautiful article about our story. We had one in the Columbia Missourian, written by Emma Murphy. The National Conference of State Legislators, the author, Kelly Griffin, called us, several of us, and did a podcast and an article with us to tell the story to legislators throughout the country. So we're very proud both of that story and the interest that was shown to us. And the Missouri Independent's Tessa Weinberg wrote a beautiful article about us. Do you have any more?
I did a quick Google search, and there were a number of other media outlets that covered the story. Sedalia Democrat, KTLO, KCUR. But I think to Senator Schupp's point, the fact that there's still articles being written about this initiative is telling. This has been a 2-year-old project, but it's still late breaking news because the work that these women have done is so significant. America needs this story.
Thank you. And I will finally, and I told you that this effort created new friendships, created this bipartisan way of working together, And we actually, there were some bills that were moving forward that could not be resolved. And we were waiting and waiting, and sometimes the Senate is recessed for hours and hours at a time. Well, I went to Jeannie, we sat down and talked about one of these really important issues. And she said, you go get the Democratic women, I'll go get the Republican women. We all came together and we decided what the outcome of this bill should be. We went to the floor and said, this is what we're going to do. And even with all those men in the room, they finally said, if they can agree, so can we. And we got this legislation passed. Now, didn't work always. There were still issues that divided us, but I want to tell you a quick story. As I told you, Jeannie Riddle and I sat across from each other. Jeannie and I were on different sides on an issue, and we were both up on the floor arguing our different positions and our different sides. And I knew Jeannie was very frustrated, but she was standing firm, as was I. The Senate adjourned, and we were scheduled to have a meeting in her office. And I said, Jeannie, do you still want me to come to your office? And she said, Jill, absolutely. What we do on this floor is important, and sometimes we take different sides, but we are working together, and let's continue doing that when we can. And it was it was the essence of these relationships that have been built.
That seems like a powerful story to close the conversation. I think that story perfectly highlights what you wrote in your page, which is working together to solve problems. I'm so inspired by you and by the stories in this book, and the state of Missouri, we're so grateful. Thank you for producing it.